The snow fell silently over the Eastern Front on that winter morning in 1944. 17-year-old Klavdia Kalugina pressed her body flat against frozen earth, trying to disappear into the landscape itself. Through her rifle scope, she could see them. German soldiers, maybe 20 years old themselves, moving casually through their trenches. One laughed at something his companion said. Another lit a cigarette. Her finger rested on the trigger. All she had to do was squeeze. She couldn't. Beside her in the snow, her best friend Marussia had the same problem. Both girls had traveled hundreds of miles to this moment. Both had endured months of brutal training. Both carried rifles specifically selected for their accuracy. And now, with perfect targets presenting themselves less than 400 meters away, neither could pull the trigger. Around them, other snipers from their platoon were taking their shots. The distant crack of rifle fire, the sudden collapse of enemy soldiers, the methodical work of killing, executed with the precision they'd been trained to deliver. But Klavdia and Marussia remained frozen, unable to cross the threshold from training to actual killing. That night, they sat together in their bunker while their squad mates celebrated their first kills, comparing notes, discussing technique. The two girls said nothing. The shame burned hotter than any physical cold. "Cowards," Klavdia whispered to herself in the darkness. "We're cowards. Why did we even come to the front?" She didn't sleep. Instead, she made a decision. Tomorrow would be different. When dawn broke over the frozen battlefield, Klavdia watched a German soldier cleaning his machine gun. She controlled her breathing exactly as her instructors had taught. She aligned her scope. She felt the trigger's resistance against her finger, and this time she squeezed. The man fell. Other soldiers rushed to drag him away by his feet, pulling his body back into the safety of their trench. But it was too late for him. Klavdia Kalugina had taken her first life at 17 years old. By the time the war ended, she would be credited with 257 confirmed kills, making her one of the deadliest snipers in military history. Marussia eventually crossed that same threshold, but she wouldn't survive. Within weeks, an enemy sniper would kill her during a defensive watch. This is the story Soviet propaganda never told you. This isn't the sanitized tale of fearless heroes defending Mother Russia with songs in their hearts. This is the real history, the one that got buried beneath decades of propaganda, the one that reveals what actually happens when you transform teenage girls into precision instruments of death. Of the 2,484 women trained as snipers during the Great Patriotic War, only about 500 would survive to see victory. That's a survival rate of 1 in 5. Most died before they turned 25 years old. And the ones who did survive? They came home to a country that didn't know what to do with women who'd become killers. They carried memories that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Many wouldn't speak about their experiences for 50 years, but their stories survived. In diaries discovered after the Soviet Union's collapse, in interviews conducted with elderly women who finally felt free to tell the truth, in military archives that documented every confirmed kill with bureaucratic precision. What you're about to hear isn't comfortable. It isn't heroic in the way propaganda makes war seem heroic. But it's real, and these women deserve to have their real story told. Let's be clear about something from the start. When the Soviet Union decided to train thousands of women as snipers in 1942, it wasn't an act of desperation. It was a calculated strategic experiment. Yes, the Red Army had suffered catastrophic losses. Yes, millions of Soviet men were dead, wounded, or captured after 9 months of German invasion. But the decision to deploy women, specifically as snipers, came from cold military logic, not panic. Soviet military theorists had been obsessed with sniper doctrine since the 1930s. They'd watched the Finnish sniper Simo Häyhä kill over 500 Soviet soldiers during the Winter War, and they'd learned an uncomfortable lesson. A single skilled sniper could paralyze an entire company, create disproportionate casualties, and erode enemy morale far beyond the actual body count. But there was another angle. Soviet psychologists and military observers had noticed something in preliminary field reports that challenged conventional assumptions about gender and combat. Women snipers were performing differently than their male counterparts, and in some ways, performing better. The reports documented specific advantages. Women demonstrated superior emotional stability during sustained operations. They showed enhanced ability to maintain concentration during prolonged waiting periods. Hours, sometimes days, of absolute stillness. They exhibited greater patience and less impulsiveness in target selection. And perhaps most critically, they seemed to excel at the psychological compartmentalization necessary for deliberate killing at distance. These weren't propaganda claims designed for public consumption. These were confidential analyses sent to the Soviet General Staff, signed by frontline commanders who were measuring actual combat effectiveness. The Soviet military establishment saw an opportunity. They could weaponize characteristics that patriarchal societies dismissed as feminine weakness: patience, attention to minute detail, the ability to remain motionless for extended periods, and superior fine motor control. In March 1942, Marshal Kliment Voroshilov signed the order. The Soviet Union would formally recruit, train, and deploy women as combat snipers, not as nurses with rifles, not as propaganda symbols, as actual military snipers with the same standards, same expectations, and same lethal purpose as their male counterparts. The recruitment criteria were unforgiving: ages 20 to 45, superior physical conditioning, complete basic education, and then came the real filter: a 4-day selection process specifically designed to identify who could psychologically handle the job. Because that was the real challenge. Any reasonably coordinated person can learn to shoot accurately, but learning to kill, deliberately, repeatedly, while watching your targets through a scope, that requires a different kind of transformation. In May 1942, a new facility opened in Veshnyaky, a suburb east of Moscow. It looked like a military training center because that's what it was. But what happened inside went far beyond ordinary military training. The Central School of Snipers for Women had one objective: take young women, many still teenagers, and transform them into precision-killing machines. The director, Nora Chadayeva, was a Spanish Civil War veteran who'd seen urban combat firsthand. She understood that sniper training wasn't primarily about marksmanship. It was about breaking down psychological resistance to killing and rebuilding something harder in its place. Each day began in darkness. Forced marches of 20 kilometers, regardless of weather. In summer heat, winter cold, autumn rain, it didn't matter. The cadets marched before dawn, carrying full combat loads, until their bodies screamed for rest. Then came the shooting ranges. 400 meters, 800 meters, learning to compensate for wind, temperature, humidity, learning to calculate distance using visual references, learning to control breathing, heartbeat, body tremors. But the technical skills were secondary. The real curriculum was psychological conditioning. Every human being possesses profound biological and psychological barriers against killing. Evolution wired us for cooperation within our social groups. Taking another human life triggers deep-seated psychological resistance. Studies conducted after World War II would reveal that many soldiers in combat deliberately fire over enemy heads or intentionally miss. The conscious act of killing another person is extraordinarily difficult for most people. The sniper cannot afford this hesitation, unlike the chaos of infantry combat where distance and confusion create psychological separation from the act of killing. The sniper watches their target intimately through a scope. They see faces. They see individual human beings eating, talking, laughing. And then they make the conscious, deliberate decision to end that specific life. The training at Veshnyaky addressed this directly. systematically desensitizing cadets through repetition and ideological conditioning. They practiced on human-shaped targets. They were taught to view each potential kill not as murder, but as elimination of a fascist invader threatening the motherland. They learned to see targets not as individual people, but as tactical objectives, strategic problems to be solved. The instructors pushed them to the edge of psychological and physical collapse. Week-long exercises in the forests at Kuskovo, surviving without instructor contact, operating in simulated combat conditions. Cadets learned to function while exhausted, hungry, cold, and terrified. They learned to make life-and-death decisions under extreme stress. One cadet remembered years later how the training changed her. After the first week, I stopped thinking of myself as a girl from Kiev who liked to dance. I became Sniper Candidate 247. The person I had been was too soft for what we needed to become. The washout rate was significant. Any cadet who failed to meet standards, physical, technical, or psychological, was immediately reassigned to support roles. Radio operator, field nurse, positions that didn't require the capacity to kill on command. Those who graduated represented a carefully filtered elite. They weren't necessarily the best shots, though they were all excellent markswomen. They were the ones who could cross the psychological threshold, the ones who could kill repeatedly and continue functioning. Upon graduation, each sniper received her equipment with the solemnity of a religious ceremony. The primary weapon was the Mosin Nagant M1891-30 rifle with PU telescopic sight. Originally designed in the 19th century, this bolt-action rifle had been continuously refined and adapted. By 1942, the sniper variant represented the perfect balance of reliability, accuracy, and durability. The PU scope provided 3.5x magnification, not the most powerful available, but absolutely dependable. It was permanently mounted to the rifle, eliminating the possibility of misalignment. In the hands of a skilled shooter, this combination could deliver lethal accuracy at 800 meters. But there was one detail that distinguished Soviet sniper doctrine from other armies: the logbook. Each sniper received an official field journal where every kill had to be documented. Date, time, location, distance, target description, and most critically, witness verification. After each confirmed elimination, the immediate commanding officer had to sign the entry. Independent observers verified deaths before they were reported up the chain of command to the front's general staff. This system served multiple purposes. It provided accurate statistics for military planning. It prevented propagandistic inflation that might distort strategic assessments. And it created a historical record that would survive long after the war. But think about what those logbooks really represented. Each entry was a bureaucratic notation that a specific human being had made the conscious decision to end another human life. The clinical language: target eliminated at 550 meters, 14:23 hours, verified by Lieutenant Petrov, reduced human death to administrative record-keeping. Years later, when historians gained access to these logbooks in Russian military archives, they found entries where the handwriting changed subtly over time. Early entries often included additional details. Target appeared to be an officer, or target was directing artillery. Later entries became sparse, mechanical. 1 eliminated, 600 meter, verified. The women were learning to disconnect. Graduation meant deployment. Most snipers operated in pairs or small groups of 3, embedded within larger divisions. The pairing system served both practical and psychological purposes. The spotter provided additional eyes for target acquisition and security. She verified kills for official records. But perhaps most importantly, she provided human connection in an extraordinarily isolating role. Snipers operated ahead of main forces or on the flanks, establishing positions in elevated terrain, ruins, or forest edges. They would remain hidden for hours or days, waiting for high-value targets to present themselves. The psychological isolation was profound. While regular infantry fought alongside dozens or hundreds of comrades, snipers worked alone or in tiny teams, often separated from friendly forces by hundreds of meters. They couldn't call for help if discovered. They couldn't count on covering fire if their position was compromised. They lived in a strange liminal space between the opposing armies, close enough to hear enemy soldiers talking, to watch their daily routines, to observe them as individual human beings, and then to kill them. One sniper later described this psychological disconnect. You watch a man through your scope for hours. You see him eat his breakfast. You see him write a letter, probably to his family. You see him laugh at a joke from his companion. And then you see him step into the wrong position, present a clean shot, and you pull the trigger, and he's gone. And you move on to the next target. The Soviet military deployed female snipers across multiple fronts. The Kalinin Front, the Belarusian fronts, the Ukrainian fronts. Each theater presented different challenges. Urban ruins required different techniques than forest operations. Winter conditions demanded different tactics than summer campaigns. But everywhere they deployed, the snipers shared one common reality: an average life expectancy of about 3 weeks. When most people imagine Soviet female snipers, they picture teenagers, young women in their early 20s, propaganda images of fresh-faced girls defending the motherland. Nina Petrova was 48 years old when Germany invaded. She'd spent the previous decade as a physical education instructor, training civilian marksmen through the WWII program. She understood ballistics better than most military instructors. She could calculate wind compensation in her head. She knew how to read terrain and identify ideal shooting positions. When the war started, Nina volunteered immediately. But the military didn't know what to do with a nearly 50-year-old woman who wanted to fight. They assigned her as a field nurse, assuming that was the appropriate role for a woman her age. Nina had other plans. She managed to obtain a sniper rifle. How remains unclear in the historical record, though it probably involved trading favors or simply taking one from a dead soldier. Then she started hunting on her own during off-duty hours. She would slip away from the medical post, move forward into combat zones, identify targets, take her shots, and disappear before anyone could stop her. She operated as a freelance sniper, completely unofficial, technically unauthorized, but her kills were real. And as her unofficial tally started mounting, frontline commanders faced a dilemma. They could punish her for unauthorized combat operations, or they could acknowledge effectiveness and give her official status. Effectiveness 1. Nina received formal authorization to continue sniping and eventually became an instructor at frontline training courses. Her age became an asset rather than a liability. She brought maturity, patience, and teaching, experience that complemented the technical skills of younger snipers. She trained 512 other snipers during the war, while personally accounting for 122 confirmed eliminations. She survived battles that killed women a third her age. She adapted to conditions that broke younger, stronger soldiers. And then, on May 1st, 1945, exactly 1 week before Germany surrendered, a mortar attack killed her instantly. She was 52 years old. She'd survived nearly 4 years of combat that killed most snipers within weeks. But in the end, survival was just a matter of chance. Skill and experience meant nothing when artillery shells started falling. Nina's story remained largely unknown for decades because she didn't fit propaganda narratives. She was too old, too independent, too complicated. Soviet propaganda wanted heroic young women sacrificing themselves for Stalin. Nina was a middle-aged professional who fought on her own terms. Only after the Soviet Union's collapse did historians recover her full record from military archives, finally giving her the recognition she'd earned. Let's return to that moment in the snow. 17-year-old Klavdia, finger on the trigger, unable to shoot. Understanding why requires understanding who she was before that moment. Klavdia was born in 1926 into ordinary working-class circumstances. When Germany invaded, she was 15 years old, working in a munitions factory in Orechowo-Zuyewo. She watched the war consume her country from the relative safety of the factory floor, assembling artillery shells while others fought. But safety felt like cowardice. In 1943, when she turned 17, she joined the Komsomol Youth Organization and immediately applied for the newly formed Central Women's Sniper Training School. The initial response from training staff was discouraging. Klavdia was small, young, and worst of all, she couldn't shoot. During preliminary testing, her accuracy ranked among the poorest in her class. She had excellent eyesight, but lacked the steady hands and muscle control required for precision marksmanship. Her shots scattered across targets where other cadets grouped tightly in the center. Under normal circumstances, she would have been dismissed immediately. Squad Commander Zinaida Urantseva saw something worth saving. Maybe it was Klavdia's determination. Maybe it was her absolute refusal to accept failure. Whatever the reason, Zinaida gave her personal instruction after regular training hours. They worked on breathing techniques, proper trigger control, how to relax specific muscle groups while maintaining tension in others, how to time shots with heartbeats, how to eliminate every microscopic tremor that could throw off a bullet's trajectory. Slowly, painfully, Klavdia improved. She never became the best shot in her class, but she became good enough. In March 1944, she deployed to the 3rd Belarusian Front as one of the youngest active snipers in the Red Army. She was paired with her friend Marusia Chikvintseva, another recent graduate. Their first mission seemed straightforward. Crawl through the communication trenches toward no man's land. Establish a concealed position. Wait for targets. Take shots. The morning presented perfect conditions. German soldiers moved casually through their trenches, clearly not expecting sniper activity in that sector. They were cleaning weapons, eating breakfast, going about routine tasks. Easy targets at manageable distance. Klavdia centered her scope on a German soldier. Young, maybe 20 years old. He was laughing about something, talking to a companion nearby. She couldn't do it. All the training, all the preparation, all the ideological conditioning about fascist invaders, none of it mattered in that moment. Through her scope, she wasn't looking at an enemy. She was looking at a person, someone who laughed, someone who probably had family waiting for him somewhere. Beside her, Marusia experienced the same paralysis. It was only the first day. We were so afraid, Klavdia later recalled. Germans were out in the open clearing their trenches. You could probably kill even a dozen Germans that day. But you see, killing a human being for the first time, that night was torture. While other snipers discussed their opening tallies, comparing notes about wind conditions and shot placement, Klavdia and Marusia sat in silence. They'd failed the most fundamental test of their purpose. Cowards. Cowards. Why did we come to the front? The questions burned through Klavdia's mind all night. But something changed in the darkness. Shame transformed into resolve. She'd come too far to fail. She'd endured too much training to quit. Tomorrow would be different. When dawn broke, Klavdia watched a German soldier cleaning a machine gun emplacement. This time she didn't think about him as a person. She thought about the technical challenge. Range, approximately 400 meters. Wind, minimal. Target, stationary, presenting good profile. She controlled her breathing, aligned her scope, squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. Through the scope, she watched the man fall. Other soldiers rushed forward, grabbing his feet, dragging him back into cover. Too late, Klavdia had crossed the threshold. The girl who worked in a factory was gone. A sniper had been born. It was my first German, she remembered decades later, her voice flat, emotionless. That clinical detachment reducing human death to numeric achievement, was itself evidence of the psychological transformation. Marussia eventually crossed the same threshold, but her combat career lasted only a few weeks before an enemy sniper killed her during a defensive operation. Klavdia lost her partner, her friend, and any remaining illusions about war. But she continued. Over the following months, Klavdia developed a methodical approach to survival. She made one shot per day from carefully selected positions, then immediately relocated before enemy counter-snipers could triangulate her location. She became expert at camouflage, using natural debris and terrain features to become effectively invisible. Her preferred engagement range was 400 to 600 meters, close enough for reliable accuracy, but distant enough to provide reaction time if her position was compromised. She targeted high-value objectives, commanders identifiable by insignia and behavior patterns, machine gunners whose positions threatened Soviet advances, artillery observers directing fire. By war's end, Klavdia Kalugina was credited with 257 confirmed kills. Think about that number for a moment. 257 human beings who died because this young woman, who'd struggled to pull the trigger on her first day, had learned to kill with methodical efficiency. Each of those deaths was documented in her logbook. Each was verified by observers and reported through official channels. Each represented a moment when Klavdia made the conscious decision to end a life. And then the war ended. Klavdia disappeared from historical records. Unlike famous snipers who became propaganda symbols, she simply vanished into ordinary Soviet life. We don't know what happened to her after 1945. We don't know if she married, had children, pursued a career. We don't know if she ever spoke about her experiences or kept them buried. We don't even know when she died. Some historians speculate she might have lived into the 21st century, one of the last surviving female snipers, carrying her memories in silence like so many veterans whose stories didn't fit comfortable narratives. What we do know is that the girl who couldn't pull the trigger became someone who killed 257 times. And then she spent the rest of her life trying to forget what she'd become. Soviet propaganda loved to celebrate female snipers as symbols of patriotic sacrifice. But there was one element the propaganda machine systematically erased. Many of these women were Jewish, fighting not just for the Soviet Union, but for their own survival. Approximately 500,000 Jews served in the Red Army during World War II. They fought with the knowledge that German victory meant not military defeat, but systematic extermination. For Jewish women who became snipers, every kill represented resistance against genocidal evil. Shura Ehrenstein's story illustrates this different motivation. She originally served as a medical orderly, but that role felt insufficient. I always wanted to meet the enemy at close quarters so that I could destroy him with my own hands, she explained in post-war interviews. That language, destroy him with my own hands, reveals something beyond standard patriotism. For Shura, becoming a sniper was intensely personal. She knew what awaited Jewish populations in German-occupied territory. She'd heard the reports from refugees, the rumors that seemed too horrible to believe, but were actually understatements of the truth. She transferred to sniper training and graduated with high marks. By war's end, she was credited with 70 confirmed kills. Each represented a small act of vengeance against an enemy that wanted her entire people eliminated from existence. Bella Epstein demonstrated similar determination. When officers tried to assign her to division headquarters, a safer rear position, she refused bluntly. "No, we're snipers. Send us where we're supposed to go." This insistence on combat duty wasn't reckless bravado. For Jewish snipers, relegation to rear positions felt like abandonment of their purpose. They'd become snipers specifically to kill Germans, to resist the machinery of extermination actively rather than passively waiting for salvation. Other Jewish female snipers included Genya Peretyatko and Nadezhda Volkova, both of whom accumulated significant combat records. The exact number of Jewish women who served as snipers remains unclear because Soviet military records didn't systematically track religious or ethnic identity in archivally preserved ways. What is documented? Approximately 32,000 Soviet Jewish service members received military decorations during the war, and roughly one-third of all Jews in the Red Army were killed in action, a casualty rate exceeding the overall military average. This elevated casualty rate likely reflected multiple factors. Jewish soldiers often volunteered for particularly dangerous assignments. German forces had explicit orders to execute Jewish prisoners of war, rather than treating them according to Geneva Convention standards. And Jewish combatants fought with a desperation born of knowing there was no acceptable alternative to victory. After the war, Soviet authorities actively suppressed recognition of Jewish contributions to victory. The government wanted to present the war as a unified Soviet triumph, not acknowledge the specific targeting of Jewish populations or the particular motivations of Jewish resistance. Stalin's increasing anti-Semitism in his final years made Jewish veterans particularly vulnerable. Many faced discrimination, lost positions, were excluded from veteran organizations. Some were even arrested during the anti-cosmopolitan campaigns of the late 1940s and early 1950s. The stories of Jewish female snipers remained hidden for decades. Only after the Soviet Union's collapse could families publish memoirs, historians access restricted archives, and the fuller picture emerge. These women fought a war within a war, defending a country that discriminated against them while resisting an enemy that sought their total extermination. Their motivations were complex, their experiences unique, and their erasure from official history a deliberate act of historical revision. Most Soviet female snipers left little personal documentation. Official military records tracked their kills, but the psychological experience of being a sniper remained largely invisible. Rosa Shanina was different. She kept a diary. That decision to document her thoughts, feelings, doubts, and transformations throughout her combat service has provided historians with unprecedented insight into what actually happens to a person who becomes a professional killer at 19 years old. Rosa was born April 3, 1924, in the tiny village of Edma in Vologda Oblast. Her family worked in the lumber industry, and she grew up with the physical toughness characteristic of rural Russian children. After completing pedagogical training, she worked as a kindergarten teacher. Think about that. She taught small children, helped them learn basic skills, probably mediated their disputes and comforted them when they cried. Then December 1941 arrived, and everything changed. Rosa's brother Mikhail died during the siege of Leningrad. The news arrived by telegram, cold and official. "Your son fell defending Leningrad." He died a hero. Rosa's response was immediate and visceral. She went to the local recruitment office and demanded combat assignment. The officers refused. She was 17, too young for direct combat roles under military regulations. But Rosa didn't accept defeat. She enrolled in the Sevobuk program, mandatory basic military training for Soviet civilians, using it to demonstrate her capabilities while waiting to reach minimum age. In 1943, finally 20 years old, Rosa gained acceptance to the Central School of Female Snipers in Moscow. The training lasted 4 months and utterly transformed her. She learned to shoot with precision that astonished her instructors. She mastered camouflage techniques that made her effectively invisible. She developed infiltration skills that allowed approaching enemy positions undetected. But more than technical skills, Rosa learned to become someone capable of killing repeatedly without psychological collapse. Upon graduation in April 1944, instructors offered her a position as a training instructor, a safer assignment that would keep her away from combat. Rosa refused. she requested immediate frontline deployment. On April 1st, 1944, she joined the 184th Rifle Division of the 3rd Belarusian Front with sergeant's rank. Her combat career would last exactly 9 months. Rosa's diary from this period reads like a descent into a different psychological reality. Early entries capture a young woman struggling to reconcile her former identity with her new role. April 5th, 1944. I killed my first today. A German soldier near Vitebsk, maybe 300 meters. The shot was clean. He fell immediately. I couldn't eat dinner. Kept seeing his face through the scope. He looked young. I wonder if his mother is waiting for him somewhere. The vulnerability in that entry is striking. Rosa had just successfully completed her primary function as a sniper, yet she experienced profound psychological distress. But watch what happens in subsequent entries. April 12, 1944. 3 more today. Officer and 2 soldiers. The officer was directing mortar fire onto our positions. Removing him saved Soviet lives. I feel better about these. April 20th, 1944. 5 in the past 3 days. I'm getting faster at target acquisition. The doubts are quieter now. May 7th, 1944. 12 more this week. I've stopped writing details about each one. They're starting to blur together. The evolution is chilling. Rosa was learning to disconnect, to view targets through her scope not as individual humans, but as tactical objectives. The psychological compartmentalization the training had initiated was completing itself through repeated exposure, but Rosa also documented her development of a unique technique she called the doublet, firing twice during a single respiratory cycle. Understanding. This requires understanding human physiology. Your body exhibits constant micro-movements, heartbeat, muscle tremors, breathing. These movements, though minimal, significantly affect accuracy at distances of several hundred meters. The most stable moment occurs during the pause between exhaling and inhaling. For approximately 2 to 3 seconds, your body reaches maximum stillness. Professional snipers learn to time their shots to this window. Rosa developed the ability to fire, work the bolt action mechanism, chamber a new round, reacquire her target, and fire again, all within that brief window of maximum stability. Executing this successfully required extraordinary speed and coordination. The Mosin Nagant rifle wasn't designed for rapid shooting. You had to manually operate the bolt, ejecting the spent cartridge and chambering a new round, while maintaining enough stability for accurate shot placement. Rosa used this technique to eliminate 2 targets in rapid sequence before either could take cover, or to kill a primary target and immediately engage a secondary objective before nearby enemies could identify her position. In one documented incident near Kaunas, Rosa eliminated a German commander and his artillery observer in less than 5 seconds. The commander fell first. The observer, standing 3 meters away, turned toward the sound of the shot. Rosa's second bullet killed him mid-turn. A Soviet artillery observer present during the mission provided detailed witness testimony that appears in multiple archived documents. The feat impressed even hardened combat veterans. As the Red Army advanced toward Germany itself, Rosa deployed to East Prussia in September 1944. This theater represented maximum danger for any sniper. German forces were defending their homeland with desperate intensity. They'd learned to fear Soviet snipers and developed sophisticated countermeasures, specialized hunter teams, aggressive use of artillery against suspected sniper positions, and their own elite marksmen trained specifically for counter-sniper operations. Despite these dangers, Rosa's effectiveness actually increased. Her casualty count climbed steadily through the autumn and winter, 42 verified eliminations by late November, 51 by December, 59 by mid-January 1945. Her diary entries from this period reveal the psychological toll. November 18, 1944. I don't recognize myself anymore. The girl who taught kindergarten is gone. I'm not sure what I've become. December 3rd, 1944. Sometimes I dream about their faces, the ones I've killed. In the dreams, they speak to me, ask me why. I wake up and can't remember what I tell them. January 10th, 1945. 59 now. Mikhail is avenged many times over, but it doesn't feel like justice. It just feels empty. Rosa Shanina's life ended on January 27, 1945, near the village of Ilmsdorf. Her unit was advancing through swampy terrain when German mortar fire caught them in an exposed position. The artillery commander of her squad fell wounded by shrapnel. Rosa had no obligation to expose herself. Snipers weren't expected to perform heroic rescues. Their value lay in staying alive and continuing to kill enemy soldiers. But Rosa crawled to the wounded officer's position under continuous enemy fire. According to Captain Vasily Merkushev's official report, she covered his body with her own, while other soldiers attempted evacuation. Mortar fragments struck her lumbar region and torso. The wounds caused massive internal hemorrhaging. She died several hours later, without receiving adequate medical attention because the intensity of combat prevented proper evacuation. She was 20 years old. She died 3 months before Germany surrendered, never seeing the victory for which she'd sacrificed everything. Her companions buried her near the place of combat, in an improvised grave marked only with her bayonet and military identification tag. That grave was later lost, its location forgotten in the chaos of war's final months. Rosa's diary survived because she'd sent portions home to her family during the war. After her death, her family preserved these fragments, but they weren't published until decades later, after the Soviet Union's collapse. When her family finally felt safe, sharing documents that revealed complexities propaganda couldn't accommodate. Reading Rosa's diary today is an uncomfortable experience. It documents a young woman's transformation from kindergarten teacher to professional killer. It captures the psychological cost of that transformation, and it reveals that Rosa herself never reconciled who she'd been with, what she'd become. She died still searching for meaning in the killing. She died wondering if the vengeance she'd delivered for her brother had actually meant anything. She died before she could process the trauma of what she'd experienced, and she died saving someone else. An act of selfless courage that contrasts sharply with the cold calculation required for effective sniping. In her final moments, perhaps Rosa reclaimed some piece of the person she'd been before the war taught her to kill. By June 1942, Lyudmila Pavlichenko had become a problem for Soviet military planners. Not because she was ineffective, quite the opposite. With 309 confirmed kills, including 36 enemy snipers, she was the deadliest female sniper in the Red Army, and one of the most lethal snipers of any gender in military history. The problem was that she'd become too valuable to risk losing. Lyudmila was born July 12, 1916, in Bila Tserkva, Ukraine. She moved with her family to Kiev in 1930, and at age 14 she joined a shooting club affiliated with the Osoaviakim paramilitary organization. For 7 years, she participated in regional shooting competitions, developing expertise that most soldiers took years to acquire. In 1937, she enrolled at Kiev University to study history. This academic background would later inform her tactical thinking, providing knowledge about military strategy and terrain analysis that complemented her physical skills. When Germany launched Operation Barbarossa in 1941, Lyudmila was in her 4th year of university studies. She voluntarily presented herself at a Kiev recruitment office and demanded combat assignment as a sniper. The initial response was predictable. Officers offered her a nursing position. She insisted on combat. To prove her capability, she requested a shooting test. At 400 meters, Lyudmila's shots grouped in a circle less than 5 centimeters in diameter. Extraordinary precision even for professional military standards. The recruitment officers immediately assigned her to the 25th Infantry Division of the Red Army. She received her service rifle and was sent directly to front lines without additional military training. Her civilian preparation had been that thorough. Lyudmila's baptism of fire occurred on the Odessa front between August and October 1941. For 70 days, she operated in urban defensive combat, where conditions favored sniper work. Buildings in ruins providing elevated positions, streets filled with rubble creating concealment opportunities, and wide fields of fire. During those 70 days, Lyudmila eliminated 187 enemies, including 36 enemy snipers. That last number deserves emphasis. Killing 36 enemy snipers meant Lyudmila had engaged in 36 separate hunter duels, extended games of patience and precision where both snipers hunted each other, sometimes for days, waiting for the slightest mistake that would mean instant death. Counter-sniper operations represent the most psychologically intense form of sniper warfare. Unlike shooting regular soldiers who might be